The following program is intended for mature audiences.
A Democratic Republic of Sports. The Sportsocracy with ESPN Asheville hosts Tank Spencer and Jeremy Greene.
From the Wicked Weed studio, I'm Tank Spencer, Jeremy Greene alongside you are in the Sportsocracy. Be sure to hit that subscribe button as we roll on with our draft prep. The 2021 NFL Draft kicks off on Thursday, April the 29th. We will be live for all of our instant reactions here in the Wicked Weed studio for all 3 days of the draft. You don't want to miss it. Next up, the Denver Broncos. The Broncos have done a fantastic job, I believe, in this offseason. I love the fact that they focused on what was good about their roster. They brought back everything that they needed to, and, they also added a couple of pieces in the secondary with getting Kyle Fuller from Chicago, Ronald Darby coming in. I don't think that they have a whole lot of holes on this team to fill in this draft. Obviously, quarterback is the number one thing that people want to talk about. Drew Lock's not the answer. Will they get a quarterback in the first round?
I believe they will, and I believe they need to. I think Justin Fields would fit in nicely with this team. He's such a hard evaluation for me. But I look at the Broncos with two guys in Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton that are both good route runners. They can get open, and then you get Noah Fant that's a constant mismatch. Good Lord,
okay.
Have mercy. I couldn't think of that word to save my damn life. And then you got the running game with Melvin Gordon, and you got a pretty solid line. Mm-hmm. I think this is, of all the situations Justin Fields could fall into, I think this is the best one. I think he would start from minute one, and I don't think quarterbacks is their biggest need, but I think it's the need they're going to attack in the first round.
Well, we all know that you have to have a quarterback to be successful in this league. And if you don't think Drew Lock is your guy, Justin Fields would be a pretty safe bet for them. If they can get him at 9 and not have to trade up, would be fantastic. I don't know if that's going to be the scenario for them. Adding to the defensive side of the ball, you're going linebacker with Nick Bolton.
I think Nick Bolton would be a great fit here. He's one of my favorite linebackers in this draft. He's not a great coverage guy, but he hits really well. He's a very good tackler. And I think he would fit in nicely next to Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. This would be kind of a sweep-up guy. He would wind up with a ton of tackles. This is a bad linebacker draft. Once you get past Nick Bolton and Micah Parsons, there's just not a lot of linebackers you look at that you go are going to be impact guys. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's one of their biggest needs, and I think they could look to address that in round 2.
Cornerback, also a need, even despite the fact that they just brought in Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby. You need somebody else in that secondary.
Short deals, then you get into Duke Dawson in the slot. And I do think they need another corner. I really like Thomas Graham out of Oregon. Okay. That's a guy that I think they could get, with that pick in the, what do they pick in the 70s? It's somewhere in the 70s. Mm-hmm. 71. I think he's a guy that, there's really high-end tape on him that he could ultimately end up being the number one corner on this team. And, he's one of those, his good's great, his bad is shit.
Shit. All right, on the offensive line, what do they need to add on the offensive line? I mean, the offensive line, I will say this, has been a little improved.
Oh, it's much better than one would think it is.
Yep.
But I look at a guy like Aaron Banks out of Notre Dame that I think can be a depth guy on the inside. I look at the depth chart with you're in good shape, in my opinion, with Garrett Bowles on the outside. Juwan James on the right, I think, is I'm not going to say he's a liability, but he's certainly a weakness. Mm-hmm. He has not been as good since he came over from Miami. Then you got Dalton Risner, Graham Glasgow, and Lloyd Cushenberry. Mm-hmm. Those are all young guys. I'm just looking to add a depth guy. Denver doesn't have a whole lot of needs. There's not a lot of things that we have to have. They have to have a linebacker. Mm-hmm. I think they have to have a quarterback. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, there's not a lot of have to have anything.
No.
Then it gets in depth and having an extra guy, and I think they could, even though they got Nathan Muti, the kid out of Fresno State last year, mm-hmm. I think they could benefit from another guard.
Okay. All right, what else do they need to add in this draft?
This is one of my favorite picks of the draft because there's just not a lot of these guys. Quentin Bohanna is a kid from Kentucky that I think he is half man, half building. I want to say he weighs 360 pounds. He's a gigantic human being.
Right.
And he doesn't do anything overly well. His greatest ability is that he's a gigantic human being. Mm-hmm. I think with Vic Fangio coaching him, he could learn to play that interior spot in this defense. This is a guy you can get in the 5th round, but there's just so few of them. And I think it is a need. That's why it was the 5th need on the screen for them, is because if you need a defensive tackle, you're going to have to draft them higher than you want to. And on tape alone, Quentin Bohanna is probably a 7th round pick to a priority undrafted free agent. You're going to have to take him in the 5th round because there's just none of them. Mm-hmm. And there's only a few. Tadarius Slayton out of Florida is the guy I would actually like to see them get. It just didn't fall that way when I broke this down. And he didn't wind up. When they would have had to taken the pick with him, he went about 2 spots in front of him. He's a gigantic human being too, and he's actually a really talented one. Just they wound up with Thomas Graham because Tadarius Slayton went a couple spots in front of him.
I would expect the Denver Broncos to be better than the 5-11 that they were this past year. Their biggest problem, though, is that they're in the AFC West. And their biggest problem is that their quarterback's Drew Lock. And his biggest problem is that he's Drew Lock. Right, but we are under the assumption that he will not be the starter for much longer in Denver, especially if they end up getting a guy like Justin Fields in the draft.
The thing that would throw this all cattywampus is if they make a deal for Teddy Bridgewater. Mm-hmm. If they can find a way to give up a 6 for Teddy Bridgewater, then you don't have to take a quarterback in the 1st round. That would allow you to take somebody like Patrick Surtain at 9 or trade back, which I think is a possibility with Denver. Solely because their needs can't necessarily be satiated at 9 without reaching for a guy if it's not a quarterback. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of ammo. They've got a good number of picks. A lot of them are very, very, very late in the draft. But I think this team's uniquely situated to be much better next year. My personal preference would be to go after Teddy Bridgewater, a guy that does not turn the ball over, and then you can just add pieces around this team. And I don't know if you try to salvage Drew Lock, if you start looking to the future. I don't know. But I think there is a possibility they could stay at 9 and still wind up with Justin Fields.
I think there's a possibility for that as well. They've got 1 pick in all of the first 6 rounds, and then they got 3 picks in the 7th round. So at least they'll be able to add some depth in those 7th round spots. I'm Tank Spencer. He's Jeremy Greene. We are in the Wicked Weed studio, wickedweedbrewing.com. Drink different. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Share it with your friends. We'll be here all 3 days of the NFL Draft coming up next Thursday, April the 29th. We'll see you next time.